Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Overview and Scrutiny Commission meeting of the 25th of November. I am Councillor Marion Ayling, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the building by the main spiral staircase and through the main reception doors. Once outside, please turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point, located beyond the multi-storey car park in Exchange Road. If you are unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you will be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the council's YouTube channel. Please note that there are no comment functions available as part of this webcasting. The council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done so in accordance with the council's published data retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery should be aware that by entering the chamber, they are consenting for their image to be captured by the automated camera system. Recordings will be used for webcasting and or training purposes. Councillors are reminded to take note that what is displayed on the screens in the room, as this shows what is being recorded and webcasted. Cameras are currently set to capture you in a seated position, so please remain seated when speaking. You can request to speak as usual in committees by raising your hand. To speak by pressing the button with the face on it, and the microphone will go green when you are live. Now, before we start the main body of the meeting, as Commission members are aware, tonight's agenda contains a large number of items. The majority of these are policy framework documents and also reports which myself and Vice Chair believe the Commission should give due consideration to. The guillotine process would take place after 2.5 hours and a vote continued would happen at 9:30 p.m. However, due to the number of items on the agenda and the discussion with the Vice Chair, I would like to move a procedural motion so that the guillotine process is suspended for this meeting tonight. Therefore, I wish to move a procedural motion under General Committee Procedure Rule 14.1L. This will be to suspend particular procedure rules, namely suspend procedure rules 15.3 and 15.4, the vote to extend the meeting and the guillotine. The Vice Chair has agreed to second this. Does the Commission agree, or would you like a vote?
Can we put this to a vote, please?
Okay, Justin?
Could I just speak to that briefly? I'm just worried about making it completely open-ended. Do we have a time that we're extending it to, and then we can have that review? Sorry.
Firstly, we would need the Vice Chair to second. I'd also add that for those members that do remember, there hasn't been that long ago when actually the council didn't have a guillotine at all. So we have had previous times where we actually haven't had a guillotine for meetings previously.
Councillor Lanza.
Of course, I agree. Thank you, Chair. I agree with that comment. Of course, and I don't wish to motivate people to do this, but of course, it is also possible under the Constitution that if a sufficient number of people were to leave by a certain time, the meeting would fall in quorum and therefore end of its own accord.
Yeah. Would you like? Do you agree to second it?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I second that.
Right. We have a vote.
Can I speak to it as well, please? Yeah. In that the process allows for the meeting to have no defined end under the Constitution. spoke to Heather this morning, and I was of a different opinion earlier, but I have given it some thought. We've got procedures to extend meetings anyway. I think, given that councillors present have commitments early in the morning, that they should be given the option to vote rather than have a default no ending or end when the business is finished position. So I would urge that we have the constitutional, we don't suspend the constitution on this point.
Okay, so we go to a vote then. Okay. You'd like a show of hands for the suspension of the guillotine?
All those in favour? Okay, 4 in favour. Against?
Against?
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so it would continue with a
2.5.
having to put your mic on, it would vote for the normal half nine vote, guillotine, and then again at 10, half 10, 11. Okay.
Right. We have received apologies from absence from. Would you like to?
Yep. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Imtiaz Khan.
Right. Disclosure of interest and whipping declaration. Does any member have a disclosure of interest or whipping?
Chair.
Oh, Councillor
Yep,
Lanza.
thank you, Chair. On items 5, 6, 8. I think that's right. Yeah, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11 and 15 declare a personal interest as a member of West Sussex County Council. In addition, on item 6, I'll declare an interest as a member of Citizens Advice in West Sussex, brackets, North East South, close bracket.
Thank you. Has anyone else got anything? No? Okay. Right, minutes. Now we will come to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 4th of November. As a reminder, these contain Part B items. Does the Commission agree that the minutes are an accurate record of the meeting? Anyone agree? Agreed? Okay, lovely, thank you. We have no public in attendance, so we will move on. We have 15 minutes of public, oh no, sorry. Right, item 5. We will start with the Tenancy Strategy report from Councillor Irvine, a member of Housing, and Nick Hobbs, Housing Needs Manager, and Hannah Edwards, Performance Policy and Project Officer. Councillor Irvine, would you like to introduce the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. You'll be very happy to hear that, and so the OSC, that I'll be very brief in my introduction, because I take it everyone's read the strategy. At the end of the year, our existing 5-year strategy runs out. We're legally obliged to have a strategy. This is our new one. There's a few new things in it. One of them is that as a result of our Housing Association Scrutiny panel, there's some paragraphs there about how we would like to be working together with the housing associations in the future, though of course that's a two-way street. It does require the housing associations to work with us as well. And also in paragraph 5, which is housing supply, I'm personally pleased to note that we've got a section in there on our duty to cooperate with other councils to try and seek out housing opportunities which aren't necessarily within our borough. We're legally obliged to do that anyway under the duty to cooperate, but I still think it's quite good to see it actually in there in our housing document. So with that, Chair, I haven't really got anything else to say on that. I warmly support this document, and we welcome any questions.
So thank you for the report. I think it's a very good strategy. First off, I just wonder on just one question, in fact, on page 23, paragraph 6, and there's a reference here. So affordable rents should be no more than 80% of market rents, and to be available and affordable to households who are on low incomes and those in receipt of benefits should not therefore exceed local housing allowance levels. I just wonder about the how achievable that aspiration is, given that we see in several reports this evening for just how long the local housing allowance has been frozen at too low a level. Did you mean to put that kind of affordability aspiration in there, given the current context of the local housing allowance?
Yes, we have put it in the strategy to ensure that when registered providers are setting their rents, that they are affordable to any nominee that we send over. But obviously, yeah, I take your points about the local housing allowance in terms of it hasn't increased, but yeah, it was meant to be in there.
Do you think, therefore, thank you for that answer, do you think it therefore perhaps appropriate to move that small piece to make it reflect what is actually happening? If it's not happening, oh, sorry.
So I think the point you're raising is the level that the housing benefit subsidy is set, which is at 2011 levels. So I think this actually reflects the LHA as currently stands. So there's a difference between the point at which you use LHA to set rents versus the rate at which we get recompensed as local government. So I think in this context it's appropriate to talk about the LHA rate in terms of setting rents rather than what we get back. If that makes sense? The LHA is applied very differently depending on what we're talking about. So in this context it's right, but take your point that doesn't help us financially in terms of what we get back through the housing benefit subsidy.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to raise something in section 3 on page 20, just the second to last paragraph, where it goes on to say there are now over 2,500 houses on the housing register, and due to the increased demand for housing and reduced supply, households may wait many years for an offer of suitable housings. Given this is a strategy, I just wondered if there's any sort of leeway of amending this so that we can be a little bit more specific on the many years in our strategy. Thank you.
I've got to say something. First of all, in answer to what Councillor Lanza said, it is a 5-year strategy, and of course things might change. Let's hope things change in the next 5 years for the better, because we obviously have an interest in housing and seeing that as many people as can be housed as possible. Dare say Nick will be able to be more specific on Councillor Hellier's point, but I think that the problem is you never know exactly what kind of properties are going to coming up and who's going to be in housing need and how best to match people to whatever properties are available. But I dare say you can expand on that, can't you, Nick?
Yeah, thank you. The reason we haven't actually sort of set out waiting times for applicants is because it's a 5-year strategy, and obviously that could change, and it's dependent on supply, and it's depending on the types of properties that we're getting into to relet. But in answer to your question, we could amend some of that wording or recommend to Cabinet to change some of the wording in the strategy so that it highlights that it's several years for an offer of social housing, depending on someone's priority and the availability of properties.
I think that, in my view, that's better, given it's a strategy.
Okay.
Thank you. If it could go to Cabinet, and we have a...
Just quickly, I had a couple of questions which I gave some advance notice on, just about what the key changes were. And I think Councillor Irvine mentioned that some of the work done today was, in the strategy, was influenced by the work of the Housing Association Scrutiny Panel. And just one comment really, that it's quite interesting, we've got to do this tenancy strategy, but in the end, the regulator on registered social landlords are the ones who have the final say. So it's good we've got to do it, and I accept we've got to do it, but some of our teeth to do some of the things we want to do isn't quite there yet, but we're certainly working on our relations with other authorities, and we've registered other RSLs. So congratulate you on the report. But yeah, that's just that question, I think.
I don't know if you want to... Well, there are my responses to say thank you for your comments.
Oh, thank you.
It was a thank you. Yeah, and of course, I mean, you know, you and I, we've been involved in housing in Crawley for many years, and you were formerly the chair of the housing committee, so you know that all the time it's a struggle to get done what you want to do, but it's a struggle worth carrying out, I think.
Okay, all council members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate and the added sentence that Councillor Hillier would like added to be added to the Commission, to the report, if that's possible. Yeah. I ask the Vice Chair to second, please.
Yes, I'll second that.
Right, thank you. That's agreed. So recommendations are agreed. Thank you. Right, item 6, the homeless and rough sleeping strategy. A report from Councillor Irvine and Helen Davis, Housing Options Manager, and Hannah Edwards. Thank you. Councillor Irvine, if you'd like to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously, I can't claim credit for this big work because it was written by Helen Davies. But again, I believe this is a comprehensive strategy. It will cover the next 4 years, and it lays out exactly what we hope to do. Of course, as with strategy, as with homelessness, which has its peaks and troughs, you can't set a policy absolutely in stone, so it has to be flexible to try and take into account things that might change. And personally, I think one of the things that I want to see change is that within the next few years, certainly, that homelessness is massively reduced, because I believe it's a blight on communities, it's a blight on families, and it affects our council finances. But of course, we can't ourselves solve homelessness. That has to be done by government. But what we can do is do our absolute best to try and address the issues of homelessness within our own borough. And that is exactly what this strategy sets out to do. Thank you.
I did ask this in advance. I noticed there's great emphasis on strategy on rough sleepers in terms of prevention and early intervention, And actually, I think the figures reflect that, in that I think the number of rough sleepers in town, I don't know exactly how it was measured, reduced from 33 to 16, I think, at the last time it was measured. But the only concern is whether the funding for the post for the multidisciplinary team will be funded by government post March 25. I'm really pleased to hear about the extra £42,000 for SWEP and emergency accommodation. So I'm quite hopeful that'll be the case. But I think the Rough Sleepers initiative, funded by government and operated between the different agencies, it sounds like it's been a real success and hopefully continues.
Well, I just want to say that Councillor Hilton's comments and support are kind of music to our ears, because obviously, it must be a terrible life being out there on the streets. And obviously, we want to get people off the streets and back into some kind of existence that we would expect. But it's a very difficult thing, because some people, that they have their issues. They don't necessarily want to come off the streets. We have to try and work to persuade them that they can improve their lives by taking advantage of the things that are offered to them. So again, thank you for your support.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you for the report. I think it's an excellent report, really deep analysis of the issues that we face. I just had a couple of questions on pages 82 and 83. The future of the private rented sector on page 82 to begin with. When we're looking at the legislation going through Parliament right now, which is the Renters' Rights Bill and the consequences for the private sector, are there any consequences for us in the public sector amongst those bullet points listed in terms of our own tenancy strategy? And on page 83, we've got the supply of housing, and I appreciate that in table 2, near the bottom of that page, these are only projections, but it's encouraging that Crawley Borough Council's delivery projection for this year and the next 5 years is, I think, it's going up, but it's going up pretty well. It looks like it's double what it was in the previous 5 years up to 2024. But at the same time, the delivery projections for the registered providers are halved over the same period, 2019 to 2024, as compared to the previous 5 years. And of course, if in fact they'd been maintained, we'd be getting a further 85 dwellings, I suppose, over those 5 years. I just wondered if there's any commentary on underlying reasons for the decline in delivery with registered providers as compared to the welcome increase in delivery overall. Thank you.
Perhaps I could ask Helen or Hannah to answer those questions, because they're a bit more technical.
Sure. So I'll take first the impact of the Renters Reform Bill. I think there undoubtedly will be an impact for Crawley, but in the main, some of that will be positive because of the ban on no-fault evictions. So that's going to be a benefit in terms of homelessness. There are obviously a number of other things mentioned in the bill which will have potentially resource implications for the council in terms of that kind of extra governance around the private sector. I think the detail in terms of how that's going to be implemented isn't out as yet. But yes, I'm sure there will be some impact, although largely positive for the residents. The second part of your question was around the figures in terms of the private sector.
Well, as compared to our own, page 83.
Yes, so our page numbers are slightly different. Which section is that?
It's sometimes known as page 19.
Thank you. Trying to keep up with you. Apologies. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think it's registered providers. So we're seeing across West Sussex there's a bit of a drop-off from registered providers. It's not just a Crawley phenomenon, and actually it kind of goes into East Sussex as well. There's a bit of retrenchment going on in the sector, so there's less interest in development at the minute right across that, and it's one of the things that we're raising across the board. So it's not Crawley specific. It's a general trend that we're seeing amongst LPs at the moment toward, with less development.
All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for their interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's commentary. I'll ask the Vice Chair to second, please.
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Right, item 7 is the Budget Monitoring Report from Councillor Jones, Leader of the Council, Caroline Mathu, Head of Corporate Finance, and Vicky Basley, Chief Accountant. Councillor Jones, would you introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The report sets out the projected financial outturn against budget for 24-25. I'm pleased to say that the revenue position has improved significantly since Q1. This is mainly due to better than anticipated interest on investments. We are anticipating an additional 2.167 million due to higher balances and a more aggressive investment strategy, while investing with good quality counterparties agreed in the Treasury management strategy. The strategy referred to is more active management of cash in the bank. This includes more detailed cash flow forecasting and taking advantage of longer term deals at better interest rates, so locking cash away for longer. This has also meant the use of short-term borrowing where a cash flow need has arisen, but it's meant we've capitalised on good interest rates overall. All of this has been undertaken within the limits of our Treasury management strategy and actively using those limits. The successful bid for the Brownfield Land Release Fund of £3.8 million, in addition to being extremely good news, has helped with the cash flow as the grant has already been received. The Treasury Management mid-year reports later on in the agenda. There are inevitably additional overspends which are detailed in the report. The local government pay award has been settled, which is estimated to cost an additional £145,000. However, the general fund budget already planned for £696,000 for a pay award, representing a 3.5% increase. So the additional amount shows that the council were not very far off in our projections for how much this would cost. Operational properties are anticipated to be down against budget for a variety of reasons, like rent and lease renewals being lower than budgeted, and some properties remaining empty for longer than envisaged. The forecast for the Crate building has improved due to the empty rates mitigation system measures having been implemented. This is technically called beneficial occupation. Planning income is significantly down due to larger applications drying up in the system because of water neutrality. Now, the council's left to process householder applications, which do not cover the full cost of the service and are set by statute. Just addressing the HRA briefly, Chair, the financial forecast for the HRA has worsened with expenditure on repairs being £800,000 higher than budget. The number of repairs have increased significantly and is forecast to be around 1,000 more than last year. We are conscious of responding quickly to the needs of our tenants where problems exist. The hope is we can move in time to more planned maintenance over reactive repairs, which achieves the same aims of keeping the homes in good condition but is much more cost effective. This is being looked to be done through the new Crawley Homes 30-year plan being put together by officers, which we intend to bring to Cabinet in 2025, and the Commission may wish to scrutinise when we do as part of your work. Addressing capital, whilst the exact cost of removing the rack discovered in Ashdown House and contribution to the fit-out cost is still being determined, it is anticipated that these costs can be met from the property reserve as detailed in the report. The work is urgent in order to secure the prospective tenant, and subject to the lease being agreed, a decision may need to come forward sooner than we originally anticipated. Members will have seen the recommendation for environment, a transfer from the Green Tech Business Grants Fund to the Innovation Centre. The main reason for this increase in budget for the Innovation Centre is the requirement by UK Power Networks to install a new electricity cable infrastructure on the site to upgrade the power supply. This work was unforeseen despite a number of reassurances from the UK Power Networks that an upgrade was not required. However, the Towns Fund Board has agreed that this increase in expenditure can be met from the Towns Fund budget and is a suitable use of money. I can confirm that at this stage there were no rival grant applications that this was chosen in preference over, and there had been ample time for such alternative bids to have been made if they had been out there. The other item of expenditure mentioned in this report is the People System Programme, which will be paid for from the ICT Replacement Reserve. I mentioned this for full transparency. It might be more commonly understood in layperson's terms to be the HR payroll system. I think if we're trying to talk about plain English. The supplier has given us 18 months notice before the current product becomes unsupported, and that proposes a significant risk for the council if that system was to fall over, so we don't really have a choice. We're also taking this opportunity to review our systems and processes relating to this to ensure they're more efficient. This has been on the cards for some time and is covered within the transformation programme. So I think that summarises where we are at the moment. Chair, thank you.
Thank you for the report. I will now open it up to questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Some of the sections in the report refer to contact and negotiations. Details relating to these items cannot be discussed in open session. Thank you. Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. And just a question to Councillor Jones. There is a reference to the better than expected outturn. I think you said being in part attributed to a more aggressive investment strategy, in part due to higher than expected interest on balances. But of course, one of the factors influencing that higher than expected interest investment income has been slippage in the capital programme. When you look at this report, the slippage in the capital programme, I mean, where do you kind of stand on this? Would you say that on the current outturn, the negative consequences, if any, of the slippage in our capital programme are more than offset by the beneficial impact of having higher income on unspent funds, thus enabling us to produce a kind of balanced outturn and a better general fund reserve? Where do you stand on this? Which is the lesser or greater of the two evils, or do you sit somewhere in between?
I have great feelings of ambivalence on the situation, Councillor Lanza, which is it is undeniable that the capital programme slippage, which has been mostly forced on us by water neutrality, is resulting in higher balances from the higher interest payments. I would say that's a perverse situation, though, in that the council is actively making money or is better off financially than we would have been if we'd actually been able to build the houses that would have housed people and got them out of temporary accommodation and all the other pressures that are on us. I can take little satisfaction from that state of affairs. In fact, it seems like a perverse state of affairs where such a thing could be the case. I think that as far as things are concerned at the moment, with water neutrality continuing to be the absolute blight on development that we have and has slowed down all our plans considerably, there's not much we could do about the situation, even if we dislike some of the effects, and I do, because there are people who are worse off because they are caught in temporary accommodation and they are caught in this position, and we can't readily get them out of that. I think that's mostly what we can be said on that.
Thank you, Chair. I have several questions which I did put some advance notice in, so hopefully I'll try quickly rattle through them. Any news on the new burden funding, which has been mentioned on a number of occasions now? And what do you want me to do, Chair? Do you want me to ask all the questions, or do you want me to do one by one? One by one. One by one. Any news on the new burden?
Sorry, Chair. Okay. The Chagosian funding, no, we haven't had the money yet, but we've put in another claim. They've moved the claim platform to Delta, which we duly completed at the beginning of the month. So I would like to say it's imminent. And the other new burdens funding that we refer to later on, which will be related to next year's. No, we don't have any further information for homelessness either.
Okay, my next question, how realistic is the £300,000 planning income estimate? Because obviously that's been pretty delayed, etc., because of the impacts of the water neutrality issue.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, we reviewed the planning income, and to date we've only received 106,000. So I am concerned about the forecast, and we'll probably have to revise it for the third quarter. But we have to remember this forecast was taken at the second quarter, and we were still hopeful to get some more income. It's very difficult to get that balance between being over-optimistic and being overly negative. So that's what we've struck the balance, but I am concerned that it will probably have to go down for the next quarter.
Something to keep an eye on, Chair. I was disappointed to hear about the rateable value. We lost the appeal as a council on the rateable value. Before we went into appeal, was there any assessment on what relative chance of success we would have?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This relates to the Old Town Hall. We employed rating agents who thought we had a pretty good chance of getting our appeal. I mean, we've all seen the state of the building, but unfortunately the decision is made by the Valuations Office, which are civil servants. They seem to be of the opinion that it's still habitable. I won't say any more about that, but now that we've got the brownfield land grant, we're going to make another application because we can now show intent to demolish. But yes, it was a bit disappointing, Chair.
Yes, I can imagine. I would have popped down to the second floor of my own office if I'd known. Just another question about, obviously, on the HOA funding, on the repairs. I think repairs need to be done. They need to be done. To quote JFK, it's best to fix the roof when the sun is shining, I believe he said. And all I want to know is, any particular trends have emerged from these extra repairs we've been doing? Any particular areas of concern that we need to be concerned about in future years?
There's absolutely no question that when it comes to our approach as a social landlord, we've always felt strongly that if the repairs need to be done, we get them done. There's very little quibbling that goes on. The council sometimes gets knocked, but most of the time the repairs that are delivered quickly and efficiently, and as you can see from the balance sheet, the spending is significant, and the HRA can absorb that at the moment. But as I said earlier on, Councillor Hilton, the hope very much is that by the change in sort of approach that we'll have with the 30-year plan and the move to more routine rather than reactive maintenance, that we're able to bring costs down. I mean, it has been a source of discussion between myself and the cabinet member that we want to set estimates that are accurate when it comes to the beginning of the year, so that we are spending a budget which is an accurate reflection of what we spend. But in the last few years, that's been difficult to achieve. I think predominantly, and the cabinet member might want to add anything if he thinks I've missed it, is I feel that the mould issue has been the big problem that we constantly hear. I think it's become high profile, and the officers have done some work to try and help residents not just remove the mould but ensure it doesn't come back again. But that requires people keeping their house well ventilated and following sort of practical things to stop the damp.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't really got much to add, but I seem to have been invited to say something. I agree with everything that Councillor Jones has said, and also what Councillor Hilton has said. I mean, I take the attitude that, well, first of all, a budget for repairs is quite hard to set in the first instance because you don't know what's going to be coming up. Things are affected by weather, cost of materials, and so on and so forth. And I take the view that if you don't fix it when the sun is shining, you know, the following year, the cost of that repair might be even greater. So, but by not repairing when the problem arises, you just kicking the can down the road, as far as I'm concerned. So that is a strategy. But of course, we still always do have to keep an eye on the costs and make sure that the costs aren't excessive. Thank you.
That's absolutely correct, Chairman, in terms of repairs. Just this weekend, myself and Councillor Russell were aware of a problem in Milton Mount, and credit to the Housing Repairs Department and the particular compliance managers. They spent it all weekend trying to mend it, sending emails out to residents at 10 o'clock at night. So, Sunday night, yeah. So that shows the level of quality. I believe in other areas, lifts could be gone unrepaired for months. And I know when there's a parts problem, that's one issue. But they really worked hard over the weekend to sort things out in Milton Mount over the weekend. So I congratulate the repairs team on that one. Just a couple more questions, Chair. Ashdown House, obviously there are some unforeseen circumstances there. When we looked at Ashdown House and the whole thing, did we look at all the different options, what we could be doing with the property going forward?
Well, we absolutely did look at all options. The way forward that we're hoping to do will strike the right balance, we think, between income that we will get from the prospective tenant and the extent of the work that would be required on the building. There are other options which are much more expensive and therefore less palatable, given the other demands on our capital programme at the moment.
Finally, but last but not least, Chair, it's actually quite on the lines of one of Councillor Lanza's further comments about choices. Obviously, on an ideal world, we'd want receipts and for us to retain the housing stock, so so we don't have to build as many houses if we don't lose it. But obviously the right to buy rules have just changed, and I think the right to buy sale has been pretty low, partly because the high interest rates caused over the last 2 years. Have we got any ideas how much further applications we've had in since, and how it might affect, on a positive side, the capital receipts we may get in as a result of that? Changing the rules, and well, not the change of the rules so much, but the change in the deadline from the old rules to the new rules.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Right, so to update members, we've currently got 336 live applications, of which 261 were received from the 31st of October to the 20th of November, which was when the cut-off date was for the reduced discounts. We don't know how many of these will complete, but the average receipt per dwelling was about 180,000 this year so far. So you can see it could be a potentially very significant sum. However, it does pose a significant risk to the income for the housing revenue account. And I think that's what Councillor Hilton was alluding to. It's a double-sided sword. Obviously, those receipts will benefit the HRA in the form of one-for-one receipts, and a proportion would go to the general fund. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I just have one question, and it's just in relation to the autumn budget implications on NI. There's a huge cost to the council, and it obviously has budget implications. Do we know if we're going to get any government support for that, being a council?
Yes, Chair. It was announced that we would get compensation. We don't know what form the compensation will take. It will be additional grant funding, but it has to be remembered that we won't get any additional grant for any contracts. So our contract prices are likely to increase as well, but the direct staff should be covered. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I'll repeat that. All the committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I would like to thank the officers for an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and request that reviews expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission comment sheet, and I ask the Vice Chair to second, please.
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Right, Item 8, the Budget Strategy Report. Councillor Jones, Caroline and Vicky will we will move on to the Budget Strategy Report, also from Councillor Jones, Caroline and Vicky. Councillor Jones will introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report follows on from the previous Q2 position, which was favourable with a forecast general fund balance above the £3 million minimum set by the council. I want to stress, Chair, this is a well-run council. All the financial indicators show that we have made the right choices over the last decade, and that we've therefore benefited from sound finances which have enabled us to deliver the council's priorities. The current pressures on the council are not new and also not of our making. We have been warning of them, and now we are facing them. But we are facing these challenges with the records of financial prudence and good management that put us in the best position we can to tackle the issues we now face. Now, most members will remember the work done by LG Inform and the graph provided to analyse the council's core spending power compared to local government across the sector. Years of the previous government's funding policies for local government have consistently worked against us, and Crawley suffered in particular. We are hundreds of thousands of pounds down in real terms on what we receive annually, even compared to 13 years ago, despite inflation and an increase in population size. That graph showed more clearly than I can in words, I think, Chair, how badly we were treated. The previous government left Crawley at the bottom of the pile, far worse than the large majority of councils were treated, and that cannot be understated, and it is entirely unfair. The budget strategy 25-26 to 27-28 builds on the current year and updates the forecast for the best assumptions available. Balancing of the budget continues to be challenging. The expenditure on the 20-fold surge in temporary accommodation is anticipated to remain at 5.25 million, with any further increases being met through efficiencies or additional grant funding. There is a risk to this approach, but it is based on the best information that is available. The forecast budget gap for next year is 2.452 million, but this is based on a number of uncertainties. In fact, our strategy this year has been beset with these uncertainties. The autumn budget announced an increase in core spending power and more needs-based funding. This is welcome from the new government, entirely welcome, because such targeting should benefit areas like Crawley with areas of deprivation more favourably. However, the precise detail of how that will be distributed is yet to be received. The council has achieved significant improvement in contract negotiations like the Horth and K2 Crawley, but these on their own have not been sufficient to plug the budget gap. Further corrective action will therefore need to be taken. The all-member budget strategy seminar held on the 30th of October explained the background of uncertainty, both national and local. We've benefited from the income from our commercial assets in the past and continue to do so, but they also pose an increased risk when they become empty. The situation with the Create building could significantly improve the budget gap, as would the unfreezing of the local authority housing allowance used to claim housing benefit for temporary accommodation. The assumptions on the Create building had to be adjusted as the building was delayed. As I mentioned earlier, there continues to be uncertainty over government funding, but it is unlikely to breach the gap with the information that we have at present. It must be stressed that the figures are likely to change by the time the budget is presented to councillors in February. So, since the budget for 24-25 was approved in February 24, work was undertaken to split the budget into 4 areas, which were explained in detail at the budget strategy seminar. In summary, there's 4 different areas, and they are statutory, essential, income earners, and discretionary. Now, each has a different strategy to reduce expenditure or increase income, or a mixture of the two. The next key piece of information is the local government finance policy statement, which is due in November, which will be followed by the provisional local government finance settlement in December. Now, the financial settlement coming in the latter part of December from government is nothing new, I should add. That's been the case for a long time. The period from 26-27 has even more uncertainty, however. A multi-year settlement has been announced with further details to be provided in the spring. The outcome is likely to include a reset of the business rate system. Now, that worked for Crawley in the sense that we enjoyed additional money due to growth. Now, the loss in growth, if that were to happen, is the main factor of the increased budget gap from 26-27, if you look at the report. There's no information available from the government as yet, but there are likely to be transitional arrangements which will allow further alignment of the budget. It is, however, impossible to set a budget for what that is likely to look like. It does mean that the figures for 26-27 look more concerning than they are actually likely to be, but I can't give members of the Commission much more comfort than that at the moment. It should also be noted that the forecast does not include any planned use of reserves, as this would have the danger of obscuring the gravity of the financial situation, including the expenditure we have on temporary accommodation. And given the other pressures, I'd say the other thing we're also looking to ensure borrowing is kept to a minimum. In conclusion, setting a balanced budget is going to be extremely challenging, and the figures are likely to change. Bridging of the budget gap is likely to require a combination of planned reductions in expenditure or increase in income combined with a planned use in reserves. We will continue to involve members in the ongoing process, including updates here at OSC and dedicated seminars to address the different areas identified as part of finding a solution and achieving that balanced budget we have a statutory obligation as a council to set. I think the next one is in December. And that will be confirmed. Happy to answer any questions, Chair. Well,
thank you for the report. I will now open it up to questions and discussions. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Jones, for the report. Just a few, if I can do them in one piece. Is that okay, Chair? Yeah. Okay. So on page 130, we've got paragraph 2.2, and then we've got recommendation C part 3. I think that for clarity, it says here that the financial report is based on a council tax increase of 2.99%, which is £6.94. That should really say £6.94 per band D dwelling, just for clarity, because I think that's what it really is. And then on page 132, I note the national insurance impact on this council for directly provided services, direct staff, is 620,000 per annum before any mitigations from central government. And as we've heard, we're expecting some mitigations from central government. And on page 137, I think there's a very interesting comment here about fees and charges, which are of course an important source of income for the council. And there's an observation that some fees and charges, they may need to be increased by more than the consumer price index, which was 1.7% per annum in this last September. And there's an observation that we, to ensure that services are operating more closely on a cost recovery basis where possible. I think that's a really important point, because while I appreciate all the challenges in the budget, and they're very serious challenges, like having to look at our whole structure of reserves potentially to maintain an adequate general fund reserve. It's kind of difficult to say to people outside, or indeed to central government, that we've got this struggle when if at the same time we have too many services which are not operating on a cost recovery basis as per paragraph 6.6.6 on page 137. Just on page 138, there's a sensitivity analysis at paragraph 6.5.10, and two of the kind of variations there are looking at what the budget gaps would be if the national insurance increase was 50% funded, and again if it was 75% funded. I wondered what kind of lack of optimism prevented us putting a line in there for the NI national insurance increase being 100% funded. I just wonder why we haven't got a projection for 100. Perhaps that relates to external contracts, possibly. And yeah, that was it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Page 130, yes, correct. It should state band D. That's an error. Point 2, the 620,000 national insurance contributions. couldn't quite follow the question. Was that's just the bit that refers to the council staff?
Just to clarify through you, Chair, that I should have said that wasn't so much a question as an observation, and I think I referred to your comment as well, where we're expecting at least partial mitigation of those direct costs.
Yes. For clarity, Chair, the budget strategy assumes 100% mitigation through grant from the government. So that also answered question 4, which was, is there a 100% base assumption? That's the base assumption that we get 100%. And then so finally, question 3 was about the level of fees and charges. I mean, another apologies, there's a slight misprint in the table because I think it says 7%, it should be 1.7%, and that's what the strategy is modelled on the CPI. Obviously, as the leader has sort of stated, with the different assumptions that we've got for modelling going forwards, we will be looking at achieving more income where it's feasible. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I won't dispute Caroline's answer to all the more technical questions, but in terms of the fees and charges, which I think a good number of our residents will be interested in, it's difficult to give Councillor Lanza too much of an indication now. These are under review. We've held our fees and charges and their increases as low as we can in previous years, either including at or below inflation for a number of years, and we will, whatever happens, we will try and apply any increases as fairly and as proportionately as possible, but we have to recognise, and I think Councillor Lanza alluded to it, the services that we offer have a cost, and with the other pressures, we may need to reflect those costs more fully going forward. But no firm or final decisions have been taken on that, and of course they'll go through the full scrutiny process as normal.
Anyone else have a question? No? Okay. Sorry, have you got a question, Councillor?
Well, it's just comment really. I know every discussion we have on budget strategy seems to mention employers' national insurance, but it should be stressed again that when I was in local government before, I didn't expect council tax to be having to fill the gaps by the great reduction in central government finance on the settlement. I think while council tax revenue has increased by 23% between 2011 and 2012, the same settlement from central government on the different grants has actually reduced by 46%, which shows you some kind of symmetry. And I just think when we look at the budget situation we're in, it's partly because some of the issues we've got with homeless accommodation and temporary accommodation, the housing emergency, but it is also down, and it is also down to the lack of worth for central government, but this over a long period of time. But having said that, I think as someone who's on the council before, who's come back up to 26 years, I think the services provide and the quality of service provide are second to none. And, I just think under really difficult circumstances, we do a really good job. But it's worth stating yet again that this settlement and issues we're going to have is long-standing, and there's no magic wand or magic tree. And if there was a magic tree, just like the autumn leaves have gone very quickly this year, they went years ago, didn't they? Unfortunately, with this last government. and we're left picking up the pieces.
Right, has anyone else got a question? Councillor Jones, would you like to come back on anything?
I agree with Councillor Hilton.
Okay. Right, all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that reviews expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask the Vice Chair to second, please. Can I just add to that maybe the errors that were picked up by Bob could be put right before the Cabinet? One was the D, band D. It was a band D, and there was another one. I forget the. Yeah. So the report's correct. Yeah, is that okay? Would you like a second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you. Is that agreed by the Commission? Agreed? Yeah. Right, item 9. We'd like to consider the Treasury Management mid-year review report, also from Councillor Jones, Caroline and Vicky. Councillor Jones, would you like to introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the Treasury Management mid-year review. It provides an update on the Council's Treasury activity for the first 2 quarters against the approved Treasury Management Strategy. The strategy underpins the Council's management of its cash, investments and borrowing to ensure cash flow is adequately planned and available when needed. The strategy also includes a range of prudential indicators around investment and borrowing limits to safeguard the Council's cash and ensure borrowing is prudent and affordable. This report also reviews and confirms compliance with those indicators. The total Treasury investments were some £20 million more than as at the end of March this year. This was mainly as a result of grant income received and not yet spent. The Council is achieving good performance this year, as evidenced by an average investment rate of 5%. As detailed in the Q2 report, this is due to higher balances and a number of longer-term deals with higher interest rates as a result of more proactive Treasury management. Some of the longer deals, I'm happy to say, go into 25-26, but it is assumed, as detailed in the Budget Strategy report, that the average will be lower next year. However, for this year, I'm delighted to say we're doing phenomenally well, and that's my words, not anyone else's. So, but very pleasing.
Thank you for your report. I would now open it up to questions and discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Councillor Lanza.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you again for the report. Just referring to Appendix 2, which is the detailed holdings, I really think that that appendix should have some column headings. For example, the second column, there's no indication of what that represents. You can infer the 2 dates, so the start date and the end date of the loan, and the next figure might be the duration, but for some lines it leaves things open to interpretation. For example, the Eastleigh Borough Council line, where we got, you could read it as though we got a 0 loan with Eastleigh Borough Council at 5.4%. All of that said, we've got some decent interest rates in here, for sure, in terms of the returns on the Treasury management investments. Now, Councillor Jones earlier mentioned that we had a more aggressive investment strategy, and I did a word search on this evening's 201 pages, and I could only find one mention of the word aggressive, which I think is in this report. So I'm wondering where in Appendix 2 we're being more aggressive and how we're being more aggressive. In a manner of speaking, Councillor Jones, I'm asking you to show me some aggression.
I think over our years in local government together, Councillor Lanza, you've not gone without for long on that side of things. Yeah, I don't have an awful lot to add on this other than what I said when I was introducing the quarter two. In terms of some of the technical answers to Treasury management answers, I'd have to defer to the finance officers. But I would absolutely say that the approach that we're taking is clearly working. We've always had a good background at this council in terms of our in-house team and their choices with our investments, and overall I think we've done very well from that. But I think I'd better hand over to the finance officers to answer some of the more applied parts of the question.
So firstly, noted about the column headings, and we'll put that right for next time. But I think in terms of an aggressive approach, it's probably, aggressive for Crawley is probably still quite prudent, so we're still acting within our sort of Treasury limits. But just sort of looking at what's out there, taking things a bit longer than perhaps we did before, and just looking at sort of cash flow and working that more is our sort of aggressive approach.
I just think, thank you for the answer, but having heard your answer and the first part of your answer indeed, I just think the word aggressive is a bit strong for what you've described. I would tone it down a little bit, because you're being, how should I put it, not even creative, but you're looking even more widely for opportunities, I might put it that way. But aggressive sounds more like private equity, so I would avoid that.
Thank you, Chair. How about highly proactive, Councillor Lanza? I think for students of local government, they could be finding a case study in semantics going on at this meeting. But we take your point. But I think whatever you'd like to call this approach, it's clearly working well for the council.
Thank you, Chair. It's just one observation really with my banking background is all our risk in the Treasury Manager report is to the council sector, and given sort of we've just had sadly some floods and things like that, is that anything that we're looking at moving forward, is spreading our risk a little bit better into other sectors at all?
I think probably other local authorities is sort of the risk-free option really. We get really good interest rates and the money is safe with them, and we will get it back. So.
Yeah, I mean we do employ strategy advisors, and they advise against too much risk with other institutions like banks, because as a local authority our money's not guaranteed, whereas as Vicky stated, if we invest with local authorities then our money is guaranteed, so that the risk is lower, and at the moment we're getting really good rates of interest. So it's always balancing risk and reward, but the safety of the funds has got to be paramount for a local authority.
Yes, thank you. I do appreciate that. I'm just thinking that there is sector risk here, and that's where we are on it. So it's just an observation, really.
As long as we don't do a woke-in, I don't mind what we do. I think keep the risk down.
Right. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission comment sheet. I ask the Vice Chair if she'd second it, please.
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Everyone agree? Agreed? Right, item 10. We will now consider the updated Climate Energy Action Plan report from the Cabinet member, from the Leader of the Council, Councillor Jones, and Clement Smith, Head of Economy and Planning, and Phil Morris, Sustainability Officer, please. I should have crossed that out, shouldn't I?
Thank you, Chair. In starting, I need to pass on Councillor Noyce's apologies this evening. The Cabinet member is he's at his home suffering from the flu with a high temperature, drinking Lemsip. So I'll pass on my wishes that he gets well soon. Just to introduce our updated Climate Emergency Action Plan, we're being very upfront about our ambitions being high, but being realistic about the conditional nature of what we can do. While we will certainly contribute as a council, some of this will require the resources being provided by central government to deliver. We're being entirely upfront about that. We're clear that we cannot do all of this on our own, and the updated declaration indicates where we are dependent on central government, other local authorities, and private enterprise to deliver net zero. Now, there's still uncertainty in the net zero journey, and no one has all the answers, but one thing is becoming increasingly clearer with global warming, and that is what we do not have is the luxury of time on this. What we can do, we must do, and sooner. Collaboration will be essential to share best practice, hold each other to account, and speak with a collective voice on action that's needed. So therefore, as part of this, we propose joining the UK 100 local network of local authorities working for a local-led rapid transition to net zero and clean air. The UK 100 aims to build cross-party political consensus and commitment to action by advocating for the changes we need to make to meet net zero and boost local and regional growth too. UK 100 members benefit from resources and toolkits, knowledge-sharing events, tailored support to accelerate progress towards net zero, and the opportunity to influence advocacy and shape future policy. We've engaged with the UK 100 throughout the development of a new climate emergency declaration to ensure that our updated carbon reduction targets are aligned with their membership criteria. We are confident that joining UK 100 can add real value to our fresh drive to deliver net zero for the Council's direct emissions by 2030. Becoming a member will allow us to add Crawley's voice to the collective local authority endeavour to lobby the government for more resources to decarbonise, and we'll also benefit from exchanging good practice with the other member authorities and identifying innovations which will help us in our efforts to speed up net zero delivery. Progressing the commitments made in this new declaration will not be possible without the widespread support and engagement with the residents and businesses of Crawley. If this declaration is adopted, we will communicate and engage widely across the borough, listening to feedback and giving people an opportunity to shape future plans. This is an ambitious statement, it's an ambitious report, and we want everyone in Crawley to have a part in it. Saying that, some will have noticed that we've moved back the Scope 3 emissions target to be net zero to 2045. I might as well mention it first, as someone is bound to question that. The main reason for this is that the guidance on what should be included in Scope 3 emissions has changed, and it's now a fundamentally different measure from when the council originally came up with the policy or declaration some years ago now. Emissions from leased assets, both commercial assets and Crawley homes, were not included in the analysis of CBC emissions that formed the evidence base for the initial declaration. Finally, I want to praise the council for also making a declaration, or hopefully if we agree this, making a declaration of a nature emergency, because I think it gives recognition to a vital issue that affects us all. the council has new statutory obligations to protect our natural environment and halt the loss of biodiversity. And because we know that access to nature is important for mental health and physical health and for improving air quality, I often see remarks on social media these days, remarks about things like the decline in the diversity or the numbers of insects, or even small things like the number of hedgehogs that one used to see a lot more of. And so we're not just talking about big global things here that happen in, say, the rainforest. We're talking about the very sort of diversity that we value happening here, and we must do more to protect that. Crawley has excellent parks and recreational facilities, but our green spaces will also need to adapt to a changing climate. We will enhance biodiversity through the planning process, seeking income from developers and working with local communities to provide long-term protection and to ensure ongoing access to nature. We'll also continue to our strong commitment to the canopy cover and looking after the trees and in the borough. I feel sure that in the Cabinet members' absence that the officers will be able to answer some of the more detailed questions that I might not be quite as up to speed on, but between us all, I'm sure we'll try to answer Commission members' questions to their satisfaction. Thank you.
Thank you for the report. I will now open it up to questions and a discussion. Do any councillors have any questions, please? Councillor Hilton, do you have any?
I do, Chair. First of all, can I just congratulate the officers on the report? I think the whole thing about nature biodiversity, and obviously because it's not just climate change, it's air quality as well, it's to be commended. And the thing, I'm glad you mentioned the tree canopies, Councillor Jones, because the one thing about Crawley is it's not just urban areas. You get more biodiversity sometimes in urban areas, and those little pockets of greens, which we've got so much of in this borough. So to actually declare a nature and biodiversity emergency is good. It shows our commitment, and I think, as I probably said on previous committees before, I love the trees in this town. It's just I live by some beautiful trees, and when the leaves go, it's just fantastic. So I commend the officers for that. So that's a really good thing. Now, understand about Scope C, and I understand that the definition has changed slightly because of listed assets, but I did refer back before as to elected to the OSC PowerPoint presentation, and I just want us to make sure that on all the good things we're doing, we're sending the right message out. And I know it's outside some of the things we can control. And at first, I actually got the wrong definition because I actually thought it was things like the airport and stuff like that. But it's not. It's actually properties, stuff we lease. And we're doing so much, particularly in terms of the housing stock, in terms of increasing insulation and doing all sorts of things like that. I just wanted to make sure that if we go for this recommendation, that we are sending the right message out. And I just wonder what else we could do, because I looked at that OSC PowerPoint presentation, and to be perfectly honest, it didn't really grab me. It was pretty underwhelming. It's not. I don't like to criticize. It's not such a criticism. It's just an observation. I just wondered if we could just think again about what else we could do, and and have that aspiration of still doing it by 2040.
Councillor Jones, would you like to come back on
I
that?
think I might invite Phil Morris to come in on this, because I think there's a few fairly detailed points here that probably the Commission would benefit from Phil's commentary rather than mine.
Thank you for your question. In terms of the increase in Scope 3 emissions that we're now including, they've doubled in size. So with our social housing and our commercial assets, That's been calculated or estimated to emit around 20,000 tonnes of CO2 per year. And so that's almost doubled our carbon footprint. And so the number of gas boilers and building insulation improvements that would need to be carried out, now that we're including that within our target, is probably too great to do in the next 15 years. What we're expecting from central government is that the installation of new gas boilers will be banned by 2035, and the life of a gas boiler is typically 10 years, maybe a bit more. But what we want for our own stock, we're already looking to end the installation of new gas boilers in new buildings that we're constructing. We're looking for the date when we can stop installing any new gas boilers across our own estate. But there's still going to be quite a long time when installed assets that have an embedded carbon footprint, they have a life. And so we don't want to be taking those out before they've been effectively used. And that's one of the reasons why we're looking to push back. Your question about ambition, I think maybe there's two comments we could make there. One is that even by pushing back the deadline, we're not slowing down our action. So we are looking to reduce our carbon footprint as quickly as possible, but getting to that net zero position is actually still very hard work. So we'll look to see the curve dropping as quickly as possible, but getting to net zero is quite a challenge. Probably the most ambitious element of this new climate emergency declaration is around borough-wide emissions. And this is where we're looking to see how we can use our influence and our leadership to accelerate decarbonisation right across the borough by 2045. So that brings us 5 years ahead of the national target. And that's will have a far greater impact on emissions across the borough than a slight slowing of our own, the reduction in our own carbon footprint.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. That gives me a lot more reassurance. I just wonder, when we think about the report, perhaps we should... I think the point about we can't do replace insulation, etc., at the rate we expected. I think I accept that. I just wonder if we can do the same thing with a slightly different message. So I accept what you say.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I think it's sending out the right message to accelerate the progress on the Scope 1 and 2 emissions, and thank you for clarifying the point around why the Scope 3 emission date has been pushed back. That's very clear, and I think it's good that we are taking a comprehensive approach and actually factoring the increase of those Scope 3 emissions and factoring those greater measures into it. I just wanted to pick up on the point around our housing stock and retrofitting the council's housing stock, as that's always seemed like one of the major obstacles, not just for us, but across the country in actually meeting the net zero ambitions. And one of the key challenges around that is actually the cost and the funding, because if you think about what a housing stock is, how much it costs on average to retrofit a single place, we're talking millions. And I just wanted to ask if there's anything on the horizon in terms of support from government to help meet those costs, and basically how are we going to do that and how are we going to afford it?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Johns, for your question. I don't think I'm giving away anything indiscreet by saying we're about to bid for Wave 3 of the decarbonisation programme from central government for our housing stock. Now we successfully bid on the first two, and we've the second phase is well underway, and I think it was a sign of our success that we've got it in the past. The thing to remember, and I think Councillor Johns, you alluded to it, is that there are significant capital costs to this. Now, under the current scheme, the government offers to match fund which is, it's very generous. That's 50% of the money, or give or take 50%. But you've still got to have the capital money to do that. Now, fortunately, we've got quite a healthy housing revenue account. But the finances are always something we've got to be, at least keep an eye on, even if we want to embrace it wholeheartedly. And that's, I think, that really underlines the point that we need to make to central government about our climate change targets. The will is there to do everything we can, but the will is there, but the money has to be there as well. And I think the government may need to give that more consideration in the future, that even match funding, on the face of it, 50% is very generous, but there's a lot of local authorities out there that don't have that capital reserve, a lot of them that don't have HRAs for a kick-off as well. I would say even if we were successful with Wave 3, just to give you a scale of the challenge, there's still quite a section of our council housing estate that would be left to do, even if we get Wave 3 and we do all that as well. So I think the points about timescales that Phil raises are very valid. And I suppose just talking about the money for one final point, it's worth making the point that decarbonisation is excellent. It's good for the environment. It's great for the householder because they get a financial saving, our tenants and the householders next to them from the better insulation. But there is not actually a direct financial benefit to the council. So we are doing a great job, but unlike some of our other activities where we spend to earn or we spend to save, we don't actually benefit financially, even if it's good for the soul.
All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests the reviews expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask the Vice Chair to second it, please.
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you. Is it agreed? Agreed. Right. Item 11. We now move to the Waste Recycling and Scrutiny Panel final report from Councillor Russell as Chair of the Scrutiny Panel. We also have the lead officer here tonight, Nigel Sheen, Head of Major Projects and Commercial Services, and Paul Barker, Partnership Services Manager. Councillor Russell, would you please introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I trust all councillors have had the opportunity to read and digest the report that's been produced by the panel. I will just speak to it briefly, if that's okay. The panel was initially set up with the brief to try and look at increasing our recycling performance. In particular, I think at the time, and I'm happy to be corrected by colleagues in the meeting, but really it was with regard to, in particular, other West Sussex district councils. And on the surface, it might have seemed that we had a slightly lower performance, but once you dig deeper and you see that the housing and demographic situation of Crawley is very, very different to many of the West Sussex councils, district councils. But when you look at a like for like, you see that actually we don't do so badly. And I think the table on 6.10 shows that we're at the mid or above the midpoint, some points up to the top quarter in various recycling calculations when you compare like with like. The timing was good as well for the council for the subcommittee to look at this. We have the National Waste Strategy changes that are going to be coming in, and this is going to be a central directive for weekly food collections. Now, the committee did consider this relevant to its deliberations, and we have got some recommendations that are put into place with the view to try and increase the recycling. On a personal level, I would like to say that it was an absolute pleasure to chair the committee, and I was very, very pleased, despite the fact we had a change of personnel, that there was a very strong positive atmosphere and all working together in a cross-party spirit. And I'm also pleased to report that all the recommendations of the report are totally unanimous. We did look at options options for the weekly collection of waste, and all those options were looked at in the light of trying to increase the recycling, and that's in there. One thing I would like to share with the committee, and we'll do at Cabinet, but also we have to share broadly across the borough, is actually, yes, recycling is very good, but it isn't the priority. The priority in the mantra that we came to use is actually the priority is to reduce, to reuse, and then, if necessary, to recycle. And that's the mindset that I think we've got to change and start nudging people towards. And again, nudging people was very much something that we discussed. There's no point lecturing people, there's no point dictating to people, it's nudging people. And some of us brought our broader experiences that we've had living on the continent, where that nudging is incredibly effective, in particular in Germany, where they use the deposit return scheme. It forces people to think carefully about litter, about recycling. And once you start engaging people with that thought process, then it moves on. And I think in general, it improves people's attitude towards littering, to recycling. We have made a recommendation to a change to the weekly collection regime. That obviously is something that is going to be discussed in more detail in section B. But I think something worth drawing to everybody's attention is that 44% of our residual waste is food waste, and that has quite a phenomenal effect. We did, and I'm very grateful to Councillor Hilton for providing us with some written questions beforehand, and we discussed this last week on Thursday, and we felt it was appropriate. Again, thank you, Councillor Hilton, for the very useful forward knowledge, and we felt it was appropriate for officers to address those in the meeting. So thank you for bearing with me, and I'll pass over to my colleagues to address some of the issues raised by Councillor Hilton.
Good evening, everybody. In terms of your questions, Councillor Hilton, I'll just go through them one by one. They are pretty much all interlinked, so they should follow, and you'll see how they're all linked together. The first question was around about, can we provide clear sacks as some London authorities do? I know this has been mentioned before. It certainly got mentioned in the scrutiny. I think it got mentioned at the last Cabinet meeting as well. Generally, the clear sacks are generally used for those authorities that haven't got a wheeled bin service. So you would typically see clear sacks where there isn't a wheeled bin service. The issues we have with clear sacks for Crawley is, A, we do have a wheeled bin service. In terms of the disposal route, the County Council is responsible for the disposal at the MRF. They have to take recycling which is loose. So they can't take recycling that is within a plastic bag. So it has to be loose recycling, and that's the sorting method we currently employ at the MRF. The other issue is the plastic issue of the plastic bags is costly. We'd have to issue over 40,000 bags, on a frequent basis, which again, so that is cost prohibited. And lastly, plastic isn't environmentally friendly. So I think, we would discount the use of clear plastic sacks moving forward, certainly to capture recycling. That's the first one. Secondly, in terms of just looking at, confirm the question, in terms of, it's looking at, obviously, we've got to move forward and introduce food waste and recycling at flats. The issue we've got in Crawley, certainly unlike a lot of other authorities, certainly in Sussex, we've got over 10,000 flats currently in Crawley, and out of those 10,000 flats, we have over 135 managing agents. Some of those agents are local, some are work overseas, and some we never, through intervention, we do try and have dialogue with those managing agents, and unfortunately very hard to reach. So we do know that flats, certainly introducing food waste collection to flats, are going to be extremely challenging for the town. This is also confirmed by DEFRA and the County Council. So what we're doing as a Ds and Bs are working together with West Sussex County Council, who are leading on a flats food collection project. We're working amongst the other Ds and Bs and trying to gather market intelligence of those authorities that currently introduce food waste. And what that will do is that will buy us time to try and work out what's good practice out there in the marketplace, get out to the market, seeing what the good practice is, and hopefully leading forward and gaining enough information that we'll be comfortable to introduce food waste collection in year 2 of the food waste collection service. Again, it is going to be challenging, but we are doing lots of work as a team. Currently, we're carrying out a full survey of all the flats in Crawley. We've been probably 5 months into probably an 8 or 9 month project. We're going around with doing surveys of all flats, all flat stores, all bin stores, looking at what types of bins we need to change to. So it's a thorough project, and that will feed into the overall programme of obviously the food waste collection, what we look to introduce for flats certainly from April 27. So I think,
So it's going to be quite bespoke, is it?
Yes, yeah. So, again, you've got anything from 4 flats up to Milton Mount. So, we've got to consider, and each of those we're looking at as an individual one, going through and assessing all those flats individually. So that's flats. Third question from Councillor Hilton was around about disposal of nappies. There's concern, obviously, when we go to the AWC, that is a fortnightly collection, that the nappies will be in the bin for a longer period. Again, we've done lots of market research. Generally, we know currently there's lots of authorities who operate a alternate weekly collection, and the advice is that the onus is on the residents to bag those nappies, place them in the residual bin, and certainly the feedback we're getting with authorities that take that approach, they don't seem to be a problem with, obviously, nappies. Also, we did run trials in Sussex, not Crawley, but Mid-Sussex and Arran did run trials over the last 18 months when they looked to introduce a 3-week collection that did eventually get discounted. And they actually had employed the county council to pick up a service where they were picking up nappies, because obviously they went to a 3-week collection, but that service provided, it wasn't viable, it wasn't cost effective by the county council due to significant costs involved, and that was withdrawn by the county council. So currently there is no service out there that can pick up those sanitary products. Okay, and lastly, I believe your question was around about just general contamination of recycling, Consultant?
Yeah, and share compliance issues as well with people who don't quite play ball, because it may be slightly harder to deal with people, or the problem might be exacerbated more with residual fortnightly collections, which I do support, by the way.
Yep, excellent. I think that there's 2 things at play here. One is currently we are working across the council involving community award in terms of almost recycling that then sort of borders into fly tipping. So we have got a joint project group working together, and that's looking at how we can approach those persistent offenders, and that's ongoing. That's a live project we've currently got working at Southgate Parade at the moment. That's although it's a commercial entity, the actual flats above the shops fall under residential, because they're residents, not all are linked to the shops. So we've got a scheme, and that's where it's sort of crossing over into a fly tipping issue. So we do take that approach, and we've got a project that's currently live, and it's a cross-party approach, looking at which will ultimately lead to prosecution to repeat offenders. Currently with BIFA, if we see problems, we can, and we do take away bins. That's followed up by phone calls, door knocking to explain what we've done, and very quickly those bins are returned, and we do see compliance. So we are proactive on that. In terms of, I think the biggest issue we find, certainly if you're looking at flats, is contamination of who are contaminating those bins. So that's the sort of biggest issue we have, is trying to locate where there's contamination is taking place. But notwithstanding that, the county council does random sampling. Part of the service the county council provide, they do random sample when the RCVs go down to the MRF or to the MBT in Horsham. Certain trucks are picked out, the load is tipped, and they do look at the contamination, from all the areas across Sussex. So I think it's harder to actually try and ascertain where that contamination of localised recycling is, but certainly in terms of a project. It is part of wider comms, and I think the way we approach it is part of the overall comms package when we come to obviously introducing food waste, moving to AWC.
Thank you for the extensive responses, Paul. Appreciate that. In the end, I think we have to emphasise is the message getting across. It's also the message that a lot of the local authorities are doing this already, and that we are still going to have weekly collections. There's going to be food collections, which 44% of the waste, and then it's better for the environment, better for carbon emissions, and most importantly, cost effective for the council taxpayers. So I think with all those things in consideration, I didn't realise when I first read the report that flats weren't going to come in straight away, and that it's kind of different phases. Because certainly from the ward myself and Councillor Russell represents, you've got the whole gambit. You've got obviously Milton Mount, we've got Wakeham's Green, where there's actually outside bins, which causes a lot of problems. Can cause problems, and in the last week I've still had issues, obviously places in Fallswood. So I think working with Crawley Homes as well, and I think they've done some exceptional work with us, between you and Crawley Homes, I think this is the right way forward. And thank you very much for your report.
I just have one short question, and it's just really, and thank you for the report. I think it is important for us to get it spot on and right, because if we don't, we will, I think, find ourselves with issues with people dumping their waste of whatever description anywhere, and it is encouraging to hear about the weekly collections, because what we don't want is a lot more fly tipping or something like that. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, and just thanks to Councillor Russell as well for his excellent chairing of the panel, and very inclusive chairing as well. I just want to make a comment I probably should have made before, actually, but it only just occurred to me. But in terms of the recommendations, we got the recommendation to change the title on the website to recycling and waste, but then in the recommendation below we're asking the cabinet member to make a representation to the junior citizen event to advocate for waste and recycling. Do you see what I mean? So perhaps we should change the wording round on that recommendation as well, just to say recycling and waste, to be consistent. Otherwise we're advocating something to the junior citizen event, which is the opposite of what we're doing. But
I of course have absolutely no problem at all with changing the wording on that, just to make it consistent, but it is subject to the agreement at the Cabinet that the service title change, and then obviously it will change within that. So yeah, absolutely, makes sense.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wanted to take this opportunity to, on behalf of the Cabinet, to thank the panel and Councillor Russell for all their hard work in putting together what I think is a very sensible, well-reasoned report that raises some extremely sound points. The final decision will be Cabinet's, Madam Chair, so I will need to confirm the way forward on Wednesday, but as far as I'm concerned, we certainly intend to closely take the report and the recommendations within it into account to inform the Cabinet members' work as we look to implement the Government's National Waste Strategy in the way most suitable for Crawley. as Councillor Russell said, he's absolutely right. Crawley Borough is far more urban than a lot of our surrounding authorities. And in the hierarchy of waste, reduce, reuse, recycle that he mentioned, in that preferential order, Crawley Borough has always had a good record on the relatively low amount of waste we actually generate compared to nationally or regionally. So I wouldn't like us to lose sight of that. And I think the Cabinet will also recognise, as the Waste and Recycling Panel's recommended, that communication and education on this every turn of the changes will be needed to be shared with residents. These reminders will be many and often, and they'll need to be, I think, to actually get these changes fully through and the message through to everyone. So no doubt we'll discuss some of the finer details of the new arrangements in the next item, Chair. But I'm certainly very happy that it's coming to Cabinet, and as I say, I think the Cabinet will welcome the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. All committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and requests that the views expressed during the debate are fed back to Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, and ask the Vice Chair if she would like to second it, please.
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. Is that agreed? 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 Thank you. Right. Forthcoming discussion list. The forthcoming discussion list is featured on the agenda and also on the Council's website. I would ask Heather to list those that have been referred, please. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Before I list the reports, I'd like to remind the Commission that the January meeting also will include the annual presentation and update on the Safer Crawley Partnership, with police partners having been invited to attend, subject to the usual incident call-outs. This meeting will also feature the Cabinet member discussion with Councillor Yasmin Khan as the Cabinet member for Public Protection. At the same meeting, we're also currently due to receive an update report on Crawley Town Centre. Having said that, we currently have 2 reports heading to Cabinet on the 15th of January, and I'll list those 2, and if you can currently let me know if you wish to refer either or both to the OSC meeting on the 13th of January. It's the SIL Strategic Infrastructure Strand Review, and then housing policies, which cover compensation, short-term alternative accommodation, stock condition and CCTV. So if you can kindly let me know if you would like either of those reports or both, and your reasons for the referral, given the other items on the agenda, please.
So, Chair, at risk of revealing my ignorance, SIL, I'm not the only one then. SIL, strategic, what does the SIL stand for?
Community Infrastructure Levy. I will say it's not very often that the OSC have had it. If you would like it, I'll bring up the FDN on the intranet for you.
Oh. Number 2.
Okay. Right, is everybody happy to have the housing policies?
Okay, so I'll put down housing policies. SIL Strategic Infrastructure Strand Review. So, the report is intended to provide Cabinet with an update on the collection and administration of Community Infrastructure Levy, which is the SEAL's money, and to seek Cabinet approval for the proposed SEAL infrastructure spend priorities to the end of March 2026, presented in the Infrastructure Business Plan. So glad you asked. It's been on the FDN since May last year.
It needs to be on a sensor so it comes on. Right. Next one.
Yep, you need to read it out.
Okay. We will now come to Part B, exempt report. This is a confidential section of the meeting. Under Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as deferred in Part 1 of the Scheduled 12A of the Act by virtue of the paragraphs specified against the items. The recording and the live stream will now finish, so I wish to thank everyone for watching. Thank you.